Right, let's shift gears now to talk about cars. And vehicle safety is at the top of the agenda this morning. At least 13,000 fatalities occur on our roads every single year. Much of the focus has been on negligent driving, but what role does vehicle safety actually play in these accidents? The AA and the Global New Car Assessment Program are shining a light on safety standards. Joining us to talk about this is the Motorist South Africa's Francisco Nwamba. Francisco, always lovely talking to you. We'll also be taking your calls this morning. Give us a ring if you have any burning questions or if you've experienced any safety issues with your car. Use that number on the screen. Francisco, we're looking at the cars that were tested over the weekend. They looked at three cars. The Toyota Avanza got the best score when it came to the actual testing. Firstly, why just the three cars, and take us through the testing procedure.
So with the global NCAP, that is always been seen as the standard when it comes to, especially the European one. You do get various ones such as the Australian NCAP as well. But in South Africa, when some consumers who are interested in the topic, they do use the global NCAP as the benchmark. And in terms of the testing, this is the second round of testing that's been done. The previous round used different vehicles. And like you said, this time they use the three vehicles, which are for more on the budget space of things. And when it comes to the actual testing itself, they'll do a head-on collision at a slight angle, because naturally if you're going to see someone coming towards you, you're going to swerve. So they try to simulate that test. They try to simulate a test that's going to be a side impact as well. And then as well, they also do a range of other tests as well that would be simulate what would happen in an event of an accident, and see how the occupants fare, how the children fare, how the car fares as well. So as a result, we can get an accurate reading to say that if you're in the situation, this is what would potentially happen to you or your children in the car.
Okay, now all three of the cars didn't fare so well when it came to the occupants and the children's safety.
Yes, so it was interesting when it came to the testing of the vehicles that the adult occupants, because they do a round of testing to see how the adults would be affected, and then those cars actually didn't do too badly. I think some of them got a 3-star rating, and I think one of them was a 4-star rating. I stand to be corrected. But when it came to the children's side of things, that's when they started seeing that there could be better safety measures that are taken. They test, for instance, the measure of impact, what would happen because they've got the dummies that they use. What would happen if the child was to hit or the back of the seat, and they did find that with some of the cars, the children would get actually a bit more hurt than the adults, which is a huge concern, obviously, because the first inclination as any motorist traveling with children is to protect your children. So it does get a bit tricky from that perspective.
Now we'll talk about some of the standard features you find in cars today, and they also looked at the autonomous emergency braking system, or the AEB. That's not really standard, but that's one thing that's beginning to feature now, especially in your, what can I say, your more luxury vehicles.
Exactly that. So after looking at all those findings, what they've actually recommended is that cars should come with the electronic stability control, the ESC, what they call it, ABS, and that AEB as well, which is that autonomous emergency braking. If I look at it from the kind of testing that we do with the vehicles that we drive, I've seen more cars obviously standard with ABS. It's a standard thing that we've always wanted pushed on vehicles, even though many consumers actually get nervous when it comes to using ABS. I'm sure you've often heard of a story of somebody who drives a car and they say, my brakes failed on me. It was actually ABS working, because it pulsates the brake and it almost doesn't feel natural, and people get off the brake and they end up having an accident. But like you say, stuff like AEB, it's an interesting thing that I've only experienced in high-end cars such as Volvos and BMWs and certain Mercedes cars. For instance, if somebody comes in and stops in front of you, the car will automatically brake itself, and it's actually saved me in a situation, because you get that split moment where you want to change a track or something like that, and then someone brakes in front of you, and then all of a sudden the car brakes. So it is a very important feature to have.
You've also got the feature, the anti-skid systems as well, but those are also not common in all cars.
So again, it goes into more of a middle to high-end vehicle that you'll find that kind of system, and that is also extremely important, because when you're turning a corner, I'm sure you've seen it sometimes, your nose will either push, or depending on where you are in the corner, you can find that your car would actually maybe try to start to slide. So what that system does is that when it detects that there's a loss of traction, it will brake the inner wheel of the vehicle and bring the vehicle back to a safe state. So that's also very important. But again, it's not something you find in a lower end vehicle. And I look at the cars that they've tested, there are more, from a pricing perspective, lower end. And I can imagine the argument that the manufacturer would have then would say, then, we've giving you a car at this price, but you want us to put X amount of safety options. Now it's going to take it to a new bracket. So it's a tricky thing.
Yeah, but then for the manufacturers, it's all about, shouldn't safety come first, though? Then why don't you take out some other, what can I say, maybe a fancy radio or whatever, and rather focus on the more safety issues? Then the price stays the same. Take out the luxurious, the luxury stuff, because these are people transporters that we're talking about here.
That is very true. And it's very true what you're saying, because you look at what consumers generally want nowadays is that you walk in and you go into a dealership and the guy's more interested in an infotainment system as opposed to the safety systems. But you make a valid point. It would be one of those things to say, okay, great, you might not get that fancy radio, but we're going to save your life, which is actually what you actually want more than anything else, because frills aren't going to do the job when it comes to a situation like a crash happening,
And the thing is, are consumers aware of these things? Do we have a rating system in South Africa? Can you walk into a car dealership and immediately when you're looking at, because they usually have those plaques with the details of the car and so forth, some of these dealerships, shouldn't they put some of these details there as well to say this one was rated 4-star, 2-star and so forth?
It's interesting that you say that. I personally haven't seen the NCAP rating being advertised on the what they call the silent salesman, but I have seen that if a car does have ABS or EBD or any feature like that, they will list that there. I think also as a consumer, what needs to happen is that when the people take delivery of their vehicles, you do need to be more educated on what your safety systems are on the vehicle. And for instance, we touch on the ABS side of things. They should actually tell the consumer more to say, listen, this car does have ABS. Have you experienced what ABS feels like? Would you like to do that? Because then it will be a preventative measure. And for consumers to say, actually, hold on, I want that in my vehicle, as opposed to not having it.
Okay. So people should be aware of these things, but we never. And also, we're talking about just South Africa here, but when you look at the rest of Southern Africa, the problem is, a lot of these cars, they're buying a lot of cars from Japan, straight from Japan, the second-hand imports and so forth. So the dangers will continue, because those cars, they're almost, scrapyard cars that are being purchased throughout the rest of the continent, well, Southern Africa, as a fact.
Yeah, it is very interesting that you say that, because in South Africa, obviously, we've got laws and regulations that you as a consumer can't bring in a vehicle from Japan, because you have to buy it, since we have local representation of these brands here. But then you go, just across the border to any of our neighboring countries, you can buy a vehicle like that, or, you've got a family member there and, you'll bring a vehicle in like that. And you do see cars from different countries, Botswana, Mozambique, Swaziland, that are Japanese imports that have been brought in. And like you said, there is no real regulation to say, how safe is this vehicle? How, is this car, good for our roads here? So
it's a tricky one.
It's a very tricky one.
Francisco, thank you so much. Always a pleasure chatting with you about cars every single Sunday.